Some people will really dig into it, but we just like to take just enough off. So that way it still has some sort of protection. And from there, we don't really take any of this stuff off, like the silver skin or whatnot. It just takes too much time. But if you wanted to, like, kind of going with the grain, seems to be like the easiest. But it doesn't really make like a huge difference on the end product. And then from there, we're gonna flip it over. So when I think about a brisket, we usually call this the money bite side. This is gonna be the mohawk. This will be the thick side of the lean, and that's the thin side of the lean. My first cut typically is gonna be taking this fat right where the mohawk meets the lean end. So you can see it's really, really thick right there. Just take some of that down. It'll look strange right now, but once we take the mohawk down, it'll look nice. And then from there, this part is sticking up pretty high, so it'll catch too much heat. So we like to kind of not level like crazy far down, so the fatty end's super small, but take just enough off so it doesn't catch quite as much heat. And when I do that, I like to keep my knife really flat and use pretty long motions. That way I get a nice smooth cut. And it being exposed meat isn't ideal, but it's better than it being burnt meat. And then from there, we're gonna straighten out the lean end. So if you're a brisket on the pit and heat's coming towards you like that, if you're sticking out really far this way or sticking really far out that way, it's gonna catch more heat and it's gonna cook quicker and maybe burn out. So we'll just kind of go where the fatty end right about ends and just make a straight cut down. Just like that. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a window to kind of see how much fat cap is on the brisket. And then if there is a lot of fat right here, you can kind of scrape it off just like that. Some places will actually get in there and dig into it, kind of like a little scooping motion. I don't like doing that because it kind of makes an edge, and it's more likely that it's gonna catch more heat right there. But if you did notice, like when you're slicing into your fatty end and there's like a really big band of fat, that would be something that might help it. And then from there, where this fatty end kind of meets the lean end right here, where the lean's sticking out, we'll just make a straight line down just like that. Just so it doesn't catch too much heat. And it kind of gives us a window of like how much fat cap's gonna be on there. The next thing I look for is, if you look at the lean end, this one's not too bad, but sometimes it'll taper off at this end, and you can kind of see where it starts to get thicker. This one actually looks pretty good. But if it was really thin, I would just take this part off right here, just like that, and that'll help it not get too dry and overcooked by the time you're done cooking. And then we're just gonna round off these straight corners. This side is a little bit thinner, so we can round off a little bit more, but this side looks really good, so we don't want to take too much off right there. Just like that. And
How do you round it?
So we round it so it doesn't catch too much heat as a point. So if it's all like pointy and like whatnot, it's gonna burn up a lot faster.
Is there any value to letting that burn out a little bit and create some crunchy, like almost beef hash, and using that another?
I don't think it would be like a pleasant crunchy. Like it would be like a dried out, like chewy crunchy, not like a crunchy bark on top. So like this fat cap, if you leave it exposed for a long time, it'll like make it really nice texture crunchy, like crispy chicken or whatever. But if this caught too much heat, it would be like dried out meat crunchy, if that makes sense. Like jerky, yeah. Cool. And I don't really worry about this part quite as much because for us this just becomes chopped beef, which you'll see when we go to slice it later on. But from there, we're pretty much just gonna start taking down this fat cap. Ideally, you don't wanna scalp it and expose the meat just because it's more likely to dry out and your bark won't form as good because water will pool up right there. But it happens, and that's the only way to learn, and it won't happen. But on the fatty end, like I like to start kind of at an angle and just work my way down, because on the fatty end the fat goes over, whereas how we did the lean end, it's just gonna go straight across. And this is good fat for like tallow, You could use it for sausage, but it's not quite as ideal.
What makes fat better for sausage?
So, like the bottom fat is gonna be really hard, and this fat just warms up and gets like kind of squishy and like doesn't grind as well. You totally can use it, but it's just not gonna be quite as good at the texture. So from there, we're pretty much just taking this fat cap down a little bit at a time. Trying not to make it too jaggedy and trying not to create divots. One thing that I like to keep in mind when I'm doing the fat cap is it's gonna render more along the edges than it does in the middle, just because of the way heat travels. So if there's a little extra right here, it's not the worst thing in the world, just because it's gonna render down so well. But like these middle parts, we definitely don't want too much fat on there, just because it won't break down quite as much. The rule of thumb, what's up?
Oh, I was gonna say, if there's too much fat
Yeah.
in the center, what happens to the meat? Like what?
It's just not gonna render by the time the brisket's done cooking.
Okay.
So it'd be like, most people when they see the fat, they get freaked out like on the cutting board when they see like too much fat. Ideally, we're gonna shoot for like a 1/4 inch, and we want it to have like color and not be like white.
Okay.
But sometimes it happens. There's no way that like every brisket's 100% perfect, but ideally that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want it to be like kind of translucent.
Yeah, kind of like a darkish color, like getting towards black almost, gray, silvery. Yeah. But I'd say a good rule of thumb is like right around a 1/4 inch. And if you scalp, it's not the end of the world, but right around there. For the fatty end, I'm okay if there's a little bit less fat, just because it's already so rich. But on the lean end, it's okay to have a little extra, just because it's such a lean cut of meat. And then you can kind of get eye level and look at the edges to see, like, obviously that's a little extra fat. Ideally, you don't scalp it as much, but just a little bit at a time. So it's nice.
So it's a 1/4 of an inch, you're saying?
Yeah, right about there. A little, you get 1/8 of an inch,
Okay.
extra 1/8 of an inch less. But right around there seems to be like a good point where by the time the brisket's done cooking, it's all going to be broken down and tastes really good.
Do you have a preference for like grass-fed or corn-fed or?
I like grass-fed beef, but these are, I think they're grass-fed started and they finish on grain just so they get more marbling. I've never cooked a grass-fed brisket, but I think it'd probably be pretty good. But I've done like grass-fed steaks and whatnot.
Okay. What is the difference between prime and choice? I feel like that's a very basic question.
So basically, like when they grade the beef out, they look at the ribeye and they base it off that one single cut for the whole cow. So it's not like a super accurate representation, but it's just based on like how much marbling is on the meat side. So like prime is going to be younger cows and it's more marbled. Yeah, I want to say it's like 9 months of age or something like that.
And then choice is older cows.
I think choice is older, and then it's gonna have a little bit less marbling. But the Creekstone's like their choice is like other places' primes pretty much. And then there's some places that like they just skip the whole grading thing. So like 44 Farms or Heartbrand, they don't get graded, but like Heartbrand is gonna be Wagyu, and then 44 Farms is like pretty much prime, but they don't have like the USDA facility there grading it. I think something like that. So it's not like always the 100% accurate way of like knowing if it's good beef or not. Like using the visual cues is more of the better way to go. But ideally, I think just getting a better shaped brisket with a really good fat coverage is kind of the ideal move. Yeah. And then once you feel like you're pretty good, and this one looks pretty solid, one little trick you can do is just make a little incision, and then you can look and make sure you have the right amount of fat that you want. And then that way you're not like guessing like over here where you have no idea. But on these edges you have a pretty good idea. And obviously you can always kind of feel it If it feels like really hard in certain spots, then you know that there's probably too much fat right there. And if it feels like soft and squishy, that's how you know you're closer to the meat. And I like to just kind of like make a little mountain like this. And then it kind of gives me like a little indentation to kind of see where I'm at.
And you're pulling all that firm out, even if it's a little bleeding on the sides.
What was that?
All that firm meat.
Yeah.
You're pulling all that out, no matter how hard it is.
This, like the meat on the edges?
Yeah, that real hard.
Yeah, so we'll take down the fat. Like, if it's hard but it's at the right amount, then we just leave it how it is. But, yeah. Does that make sense?
You're not afraid to leave it on, so you're saying.
Yeah, as long as it's the right amount. It'll still break down by the time it's done cooking. And then we're just making sure everything's nice and round. And it's good to go.
Would you say that's a thicker or thinner or just right brisket from what you always cook?
I would say it's probably pretty standard. I'd say it's a smaller brisket than normal. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
It's a little bit smaller. They look a little bit smaller in the fridge, and I was pulling them out, but last week they were like huge.
Okay.
Yeah. But it just goes by like week to week.
What went into choosing Creekstone?
So we just like the way it tastes. Like